Exciting news! You can now purchase my book, Rational Answers to Stupid Questions, simply by clicking the top link in the description. The book is available exclusively on BookBaby, who has been my partner in creating my book. Enjoy the video. Here's the Planet Peterson origin story. How did I get started on this track? Well, it started like 27 years ago or whatever. I remember when I was a little kid, we went to Watertown, South Dakota, which was this nearby big town of like 20,000 people. And there was this woman, and she had this house, and in the house she had this basement, and in the basement was this enormous library of just all kinds of books. And my dad has like over 1,000 books, and we would go there and just look for stuff. And I got a couple of books there when I was little, and this is one of them. Let me see if I can find real quick, because that last guest was talking about the Wolverine, and Wolverine 82 221. See if I can find it. I still remember what the picture looks like in my head, because it always kind of freaked me out as a kid. Sorry, this is taking way too long. Aha, there it is. So, the Wolverine. There, you can see the picture of it, looking pretty ferocious. There we go. So, anyways, I just, for whatever reason, you can see like all my underlining and like brackets in here. In here it talks about, I forgot about that. I'm kind of an artist, so you guys probably can't see it, but there's like pencil marks on here because I traced this because I was like drawing pictures as a kid. But anyways, it talks about in here how a Wolverine once broke out of a zoo and killed a polar bear. And so I was always like, dang, the Wolverine's like, that's the most badass animal of all time, isn't it? Because like they're not big, but they're so ferocious. And so I just, as a kid, very young age, I was always just like, the Wolverine is like the craziest, most ferocious animal. And then you grow up and you learn about honey badger, and honey badger don't give a fuck, right? So anyway, this whole book it's just animal stuff. And this is an old book. It's from like the 60s or whatever. But I would just sit down in the living room on my belly, just reading this book night after night after night after night, just learning all I could about animals and stuff. And that's kind of part of the big thing about what got me into science, was like animals and dinosaurs or whatever. But then, did I read The Selfish Gene? Yeah, I read that like almost 10 years ago. This book also, so this is a huge book and it's kind of falling apart, but the Children's Book of Questions and Answers. And this is just like, it's literally everything is in this book. So, why don't trees grow on mountaintops? When were breakfast cereals first used? Where is the longest snake in the world? Not what is, where is the longest snake in the world? Why was gunpowder... Wait, what? Why was the gunpowder plot? That's what that says. Why was the gunpowder plot? I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. When was the French Revolution? When was aspirin first used? It's just so... my headphones. So same thing. I would when I was a kid, it felt like hours, but it was probably just minutes. I would just sit there and look through this and read through all this stuff and just learn as much as I could. And that is my origin story. That's how I got into just loving to learn about the world.
And I saw a theist object, and it kind of put the atheist in a position of not being able to answer when they argued that this integration of the ERV into the germline DNA is purely random, and that science has proven this, that it's random. It has no, like, or I'm trying to think, not random, it was rather that, or it has like
that was the worst thing they could have said.
Well, that's essentially where it went, and I don't study biology. I had no way to gather if it was wrong or not.
Yeah, no, it's correct, and it's devastating for their position. So it is random where it's not 100. Well, okay, it is random, but it's not random in a certain way. So a retrovirus can't insert its DNA anywhere in the genome, but our genome is huge. So uh there's a huge number of different site locations where it can be put
They're
in.
like preferred target sites, right?
Yeah, basically, but they go all
Yeah.
throughout our genome. Now, it is random where it ends up, right? That's completely true. But this is part of how we know that us and chimpanzees are related. I'm not sure if people are sick and tired of me saying this, but I actually wrote about this in my book. So let me actually pull that up real quick so I can get the numbers exactly right.
You're
The
good.
genetic comparison between humans and chimpanzees reveals many ERVs in the same genomic locations, supporting the consensus that humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor around 5 to 7 million years ago. Of the 211 known retrovirus insertions in the human genome, chimpanzees share 205 of them. The genome has well over 10 million locations where a retrovirus could insert itself. The probability of sharing even 12 specific locations with another species is less than 1 over the total number of atoms in the observable universe. But we don't share 12, we share 205. So the thing about it being random does nothing to support their claim because we've compared, yes, it is random, but we've compared exactly where we have these and exactly where they have them. And 205 out of 211 of them match perfectly, which now you can't argue, oh, yeah, but it's not all of them. We've been
Mm.
separated from our common ancestor for millions of years. Of course, there would be a few others. So, how much does genetics versus the environment affect our voices and how we sound? Well, in terms of like the like actual tone, tenor of your voice, that's basically 100% genetic because it depends on the shape of your skull, the shape of your vocal cords, the shape of like your mouth, even like the shape of your teeth and stuff like that. But in terms of like the way people speak, I mean, first generation immigrant children have like if they move to America, they have American accents. They don't grow up with the accents that their parents have, and that's really fascinating. It's almost entirely social in that regard. It's pretty cool. There's actually some really cool studies on children that have invented like their own languages too. Like there are these language things called pidgins and creoles. A pidgin is basically a really rudimentary language that people that a lot of this happened because of slavery, tragically, like in Haiti, because people from different parts of Africa that didn't speak the same language came together. And so they come up with like a really rudimentary language at first to be able to communicate. And that's what a pidgin is. And then a Creole is just like a blending of languages, but it becomes its own like fully developed language with its own like unique grammar and tense structure and all kinds of interesting things. So
Okay. So pretty much it's like you're saying so the actual tones is genetic, but like our accents and stuff is mainly social.
yeah, basically it's completely social, pretty much. Unless you're like somehow not allowed to like leave the house or socialize or whatever,
Oh
then
yeah,
you would have probably the same accent, whatever that your parents have. But no, kids grow up speaking like their peers.
yeah. That was kind of a follow up question I was gonna ask. So like, if you had like a child, right? Let's hypothetically they grew up like very isolated, pretty much like by themselves, no talking like whatsoever with other people. If they were to then like when they grow up as an adult come into the real world, they wouldn't sound that socially distant from everyone else.
No, well, it could depend. I teach in California. Every single one of my students is Hispanic, right? Some of them, like I heard one of them the other day, they said like English isn't my first language, And I was really blown away by that because they don't have an accent at all. Um, so they grew up first speaking Spanish, and then started speaking, or and yeah, and then learned English. But yeah, I mean, I have students who are still mastering the English language, and you can tell that they have an accent, like it's really obvious. But yeah, this student, I was like, that's fascinating. I wonder at what age that started happening. I thought that was pretty cool. But uh, if a child was like totally like neglected, basically, there is a critical age where if you don't ever get exposed to a language, you will never ever learn it. There was actually this girl,
Oh,
she was from California. This was like in the 90s or something. She was just kept in a basement her whole life. When she was like 13 or 15, she escaped and she never ever learned how to actually speak. She could say words, but she completely lacked the ability to do any kind of grammar, to form sentences. She would just accidentally sometimes say things like juice want, you know, but it was just a complete
oh,
crapshoot.
okay, that's interesting. I never heard of that before. So there's like a moment where like your brain just can no longer like understand those languages or get to know them.
Can't understand any language. It's fascinating. You can take any child born anywhere in the world and they can be transplanted to any family anywhere in the world and they will learn any language. It's really cool. But yeah, there's a critical stage where if it doesn't happen before it's around the age 5 or 6, where you'll just never be able to figure it out. The Language Instinct by Steven Pinker is a really cool book about language. So if anybody wants
Okay,
to check it out.
I'm gonna check that out. Thank you.
So when I was really little, I wanted to be an oceanographer, because I wanted to be the first person to ever film a giant squid. That was like really specifically what I wanted to do. But I lived in South Dakota, and so I was like, how's that ever going to happen? And then when I was like, it's still in middle school, somebody filmed one in the wild, and so it's not exactly that my dream was crushed, but I don't know that it didn't last. But I think we kind of all have dreams like that when we're little, and very few of us follow up on it. In terms of like areas of active research, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a researcher. I'm a learner, I would say, and I just like to learn stuff. Now, like science, like evolution mostly is what I like to read about the most. And I really like evolutionary psychology and like groupthink and how that plays into how do people form beliefs and like how do political identities align with that. That interests me a lot, and I was really into that for a while. But this kind of started, I don't know, about 10 years ago. And I think it was just because of a couple of books I read. I am extremely into learning about Native American history, like North and South America. I know really very little about like Central American history, like the Triple Alliance. We usually call them the Aztecs and the Olmecs and the Maya. I don't really know very much about them. I guess I would say I know a pretty decent amount about the Triple Alliance because I've read a lot about it. But funny enough, I went to Barnes and Noble the other day, and the line went all the way to the back of the store, so I ended up putting all my books away. But I picked up like 5 books. Um, Actually, I took photographs of them. I don't remember what the titles of all of them were, but I can pull them up. Because where are they? Um, Here they are. These were the books that I picked up. Oh no, I can't. What? When I try to make the picture bigger, it zooms me in. So, Rise and Reign of the Mammals. That's more of an evolution book, but book about Columbus's voyages. When Moctezuma met Cortez, Last Days of the Inca, and then that's a book about the Roman Empire. And then there was one other book, but I don't see it on there. I don't know, it's not in the photo for some reason. So I would say that's in terms of like current areas of like interest or quote unquote research, I would say that. Ancient history, I got exposed to a lot of that like in school and on TV, so it doesn't interest me all that nearly as much. But if anybody's interested in that kind of thing, I cannot possibly recommend high enough the podcast called Fall of Civilizations. You can listen to it on Spotify, but you really should watch them on YouTube because the footage that this guy, it's like all stock footage, but the way they put it together is so unbelievably immersive and beautiful. The podcasts, some of them are up to 4 hours long, but most of them are shorter. But the way he describes things, it's so rich that you feel like you read an 800-page book when you listen to one of his podcasts. So I just finished listening to one about the Egyptian, like the entire history of ancient Egypt. It's really great. But he has like a 4 hour thing on when the Spanish overthrew Moctezuma, and it's just absolutely amazing. It's literally it's not a book, but if it were a book, it would be like the best history book I've ever read. I cannot recommend it enough. It's called Fall of Civilizations. So check it out.
Ooh, nice. And like I guess a part two to that, right? Now imagine like you had unlimited funding, right, to conduct any research project or to have people who are very qualified to like do all the work, right? What is something a research project that you would really want to fund if you had unlimited funding, and why would you want to fund it? Or like why would that be your choice?
Oh man. I don't know. This is way too good of a question. So, off the top of my head, couple of things that I have actually thought a lot about because I think these are significant like world problems. Desalination, like basically making fresh water. Like we kind of know how to do that, but it's not really actually scalable, and there are other like significant problems that causes. I think that would be I think that would be transformative for the entire world. I think it would solve a lot of global problems as well. So based strictly on like a utilitarian point of view, I would say that. And it's not like the most groundbreaking thing. It's not super sexy. It's not like on the edge of what we don't know. It's just like, I just think it's like super important, But other than that, I the other thing I would say is, if we had kept funding NASA the way we had like in the 60s and 70s, people would have landed on Mars in the 90s. It's just what we would know now, and like the technological offshoots that would have come with that, I think are just the return on investment for that is so great. So I would basically, that would be like my other answer, like improve or like significantly increase our funding toward NASA, basically, because I'm a shill.
Yeah, honestly, like that's something I still wish that would happen. Like I remember being a little, I think 10 or 11 at the time, right? I remember hearing originally when NASA lost a ton of funding and actually being distraught over it as a little kid because I was really into that stuff. But I guess like the final thing I want to ask right? And this is just going to be very simple. How'd you come up with the name and design for Spanky, our Lord and Savior?
I don't know. I started saying that way before I ever like bought a Spanky, he's right here. Before I ever bought Spanky, I talked about Spanky for months. And then here's the anti-Spanky right here. I like literally just one day was talking to some apologist, and they were like, no, because the reason the universe exists or whatever, blah, 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 is because God. And the way Spanky actually started out was I said, okay, well, I believe in a purple hippopotamus that lives in my ass named Spanky. Very few people remember that detail, that Spanky originally, the origin story of him is that he lives in my ass. So it was completely ad lib.